record on this computer. Okay. So thanks you guys for being here. As you know, it's not required that you attend these. I mean, all of our schedules have been extremely disrupted, but obviously I want to set this up so that it's our usual class time. It's our group. It's not anybody else. It's good to see you guys or hear your guys' voices. You're not required to attend these, though I will be giving everybody 2 points towards their class participation. And then I will upload this recording to Canvas if you want to go back through it or review it. And for those obviously that aren't here, they can watch it then. So today I'm going to go over this new module. And like I said, if you have any questions as I go through this, let me know. And I believe everybody can see the PowerPoint. So the M3 overview, one question that this all, I mean, you should know somewhat of what this new assignment is about, but I want to talk a little bit about where this is coming from, right? What exactly is this last writing assignment? And one thing, I'm going to sort of talk a little bit theoretical at first. If you remember, I usually go into a little bit of theory, but whenever I'm introducing a module, but then I'm going to get very pragmatic and very specific. What is the video essay? How do we choose a topic? How do we make sure the topic is effective? I'll be getting to all those things. But one thing just to begin is what this last writing assignment is, in many ways, it's the same thing that we've been doing already, if you want it to be, which is to say that you're writing a critical argumentative analysis. You're writing a central claim, subclaim driven analysis and argument, the thing that you've been doing for 105 and 106, okay? So you're not writing a personal essay, you're not writing a novel or a short story, you're not writing a long poem or anything like that, right? We're practicing the method that we've been practicing this whole time through 105 and 106, the same. So you see that it says context, method, now application. My idea about giving you the option to choose whatever topic you want, if you want to do that, is to sort of give us some lesson about how we can take the things that we've learned through these classes of 105 and 106. We can take these things and apply them in our own lives or our future lives, our professional worlds, our professional context. So granted, you're coming to the end of your, and happily, and congratulations, you're coming to the end of your first year writing program experience, college level writing. You're probably not going to be assigned papers like this again. I mean, obviously you'll have papers in other classes where you're, writing research papers or writing, whatever seminar papers. And you'll be asked to make arguments and analyze things. But I wanted to set up a situation where you can practice the craft of like how these skills being critical analysis and argumentation, developing central claims, developing subclaims, evidence examples, analysis of those evidence examples, being able to apply those skills to whatever it is you're doing or whatever you're interested in. While granted, you might not be writing 5-page central claim driven essays in your future, these skills, I think, are going to be extraordinarily useful, or at least useful to you in whatever position you go to. And by position, I mean whatever professional field you go into. So I don't care if you're designing a video game, you're going to have to pitch that video game to some video game company. And you're going to have to identify why your video game is going to sell. You're going to have to understand context. You're going to have to understand audience. You're going to have to understand the history of video games in that genre in order to explain why your video game's a little different or add something to that genre. My wife works in the fashion world, right? So she's got to pitch all the time certain designs that she sets up for various seasons. So the spring fashions, the fall fashions, and she's got to pitch it to the CEOs. She's got to talk about context. She's got to analyze the styles, why she thinks they'll be successful, how they've compared to last year. So critical analysis, critical thinking happens in all kinds of fields, not to mention rhetoric, right? So it's really just about, it's not that we're writing a whole different paper, or we just have options. So the quotes that are in this slideshow, or at least this first slide, are coming directly from the M3 overview. This last writing assignment asks you to put your critical thinking and writing skills to work in service of something you care about. I mean, you've had much choice with our previous papers about what to write about, so I'd give you a general topic like subcultures, or I'd give you a general topic like non-traditional narratives or new narratives, and you got to choose whatever you were interested in based on that topic. But I'm now, have the option to come up with a topic all on your own, if you want to do that. If you don't want to, if that's just too much, And you need to be realistic about this, right? We're obviously in extenuating circumstances here. If it seems like too much, it's too anxiety, it's adding to your anxiety to like have to choose your own topic, then just go with the icon topic. Absolutely. It's just like it's a regular assignment that I would be giving. But in this case, I want to give you the option to choose your own. So the genre of what we're doing is the same. I just went through that. We're doing a critical analysis and argument. Okay. Um, so it needs to be a central claim and subclaim driven argumentative analysis. I'm not asking you to do anything different on that level. Now, choice. The thing you do have this time that's a little different is choices. Two different choices to make. One is you can select your own topic. And you've started to brainstorm ideas in the discussion board, the topic brainstorm discussion board, which is really interesting to see. If, like I said, you're not comfortable with that or it seems a little too overwhelming, then I would go with the icon assignment route. The other choice you have is between writing a written essay, which that's what we've been doing this whole time, a central claim, subclaim driven argumentative analysis, just the way we've been doing introduction, support paragraphs, counter argument paragraph if you want it, conclusion. So just writing another essay, or you have the option to do a video essay. And I'll explain a little bit right now what that video essay is. Basically, you know what the written essay is. So again, keeping in mind, not overloading yourself. If you're not somebody who's not, like putting together a PowerPoint presentation and recording a narration of it or creating a kind of video, if that's something that feels like it's going to take a lot of work for you to understand and learn how to do, I would recommend just sticking with the written essay, right? You don't, maybe one day you want to learn those things and you want to understand how to do those things, but right now might not be the time, right? It's a busy time. It's a high emotional time. We're all busy, and extra, our brain is occupied in multiple ways beyond just school with this pandemic. So again, if you want to keep things just the way they were, do the icon assignment and do a written essay. However, if you're somebody who's intrigued by the idea of doing a video essay, all it basically is, well, let me say first, it's not expected that you have some masterful technical expertise, right? The video essay will not be evaluated based on how aesthetically beautiful or amazing it is in terms of the way it looks, right? We're all going to have different skill levels when it comes to this. I'm not very good at it, as you can tell, but right, some people are pretty good at it, but it's not expected for you to have amazing technical expertise to do the video essay. What you're doing at minimum is essentially recording. I'm sorry you can probably hear my son. He's having a hard time with this whole thing as well. So I apologize because he can be a little loud. So I'm sure you can still hear me. The video, you don't have to have amazing technical expertise. At its core, or at its most basic, the video essay is just taking a PowerPoint or a Google Slides presentation and recording a narration over it. Now, of course, it's different from a written essay. You're not just going to be copying and pasting your text onto PowerPoint slides and reading your essay. No, it's going to be a presentation. And it's going to be recorded. So it's going to be a video. You're going to have a central claim. You're going to have an introduction, but you're going to be using images and you're going to be using whatever infographics, whatever it might be, the way you would do, like if you're creating a power presentation to do in class, you would be doing that, except obviously in a video form, and that it's recorded. So it's just a PowerPoint or some sort of presentation with a narration on top of it. So if that's intriguing to you, then absolutely you might want to consider that option instead of the written essay. These are skills that the video essay represents skills that are just as important as written essay skills, right? You're still doing critical analysis, you're still developing a central claim, you're still developing subclaims, but you're also practicing the art of sort of oral presentation, which is to say you're presenting the thing because you're including a spoken narration. So even if that spoken narration is something you're reading, that's fine, but you want to be treating it like you have an audience, a live audience that's in front of you. So you don't want to just be reading a paper. You want to sort of be talking to us, conversation, whatever. Any questions before I move on beyond those choices between medium and topic. Any questions about those two things real quick while we're here? Okay, I don't think anybody, we'll have a chance to sort of ask questions again when we get, when I'm done with this presentation. There's about 3 or 4 more slides, so it's not too much longer and they won't be as long. So let me give you a little bit of background and context. Let me give you a little bit of a sense of well, yeah, background and context, but how do you make this happen? First of all, the purpose, like I said, is the same as it's been before, right? It's an in-depth analysis and argument, not just a criticism. And this is something I talked about before. I just kind of wanted to remind us of this. When I say critical analysis and critical thinking, that does not mean criticism or to criticize, right? So to criticize in everyday speech means like to point out the flaws of something and to explain why something's problematic or objectionable. That's to criticize something. Critical thinking, critical analysis is what we've been doing, right? So what exactly is critical analysis? Just to remind ourselves, this is sort of a very wordy quote, so I'm going to sort of break it down into the key points. But a critical argument analysis does a couple of things. It should account for society within a historical context. You should recognize that. When we're talking about our introductions, I'm constantly saying, so what's set up the context of the Black Panthers, for example, set up the context of race relations during the 1960s when the Black Panthers were at their peak, right? Setting up context in our introductions. That's one thing it does. It also digs beneath the surface of social life, meaning don't just tell us the stuff that we already know about the Black Panthers, right? Use your research to provide an in-depth analysis, right? So you might have heard me say in my comments on your WD2, right? It's not a research report. You're not just providing a book report on the Black Panthers, for example. You're not just telling us who they were. You're making an argument. You're making an analysis of why you think they were important and valuable, right? Or problematic and dangerous. So finally, it's uncovering assumptions that keep human beings from an understanding of how the world works, which is to say that there's some sort of social meaning. And you obviously recognize that from me saying to you guys, what's the consequence? What's the significance? That's why we're talking about social issues. So if we look at sort of the 3 key ideas here, this is what we've been doing all semester long and in 105. You're writing about something within context. You're making an in-depth analysis that often challenges common knowledges or goes deeper than common knowledge. And then you have some sort of social meaning or social value in your argument. What do we learn from the Black Panthers? What do we learn from the Riot Girl movement? What do we learn once we look at the Little Mermaid more closely about gender in our society? So that's the kind of theoretical part in terms of what we're doing and have been doing with these papers. So let's get a little more pragmatic, a little more nuts and bolts here. So what is the difference between topic and focus? We've talked about this before, but since we're in the situation where you can sort of start to brainstorm your own topic, it's good to understand the difference between these things, because these are 2 words that you're going to encounter through all our assignment sheets and so forth. Generally speaking, a focus is more specific than a topic. A topic is the general subject of an analysis or argument, right? So in our previous 2 assignments, I've been giving you a topic, right? Subcultures or non-traditional narratives. Subculture by itself is way too broad of a topic to analyze in a 4 to 5 page paper. Way too broad, right? So you've already had practice in this process of identifying a focus. So, you go out and you did some research and you realize you want to write your paper on the Riot Girl movement. You want to write your paper on hippies, or you wanted to write your paper on YouTube, social media influencers, or whatever it might be. Or you wanted to write your paper on the Punisher as a non-traditional narrative, or you wanted to write your paper on Mulan as your non-traditional narrative. So what we're working towards this week is getting to a more specific focus within a larger topic. In that topic brainstorm discussion board, some of you are already doing that, right? Like, oh, I'm really interested in theater, let's say, particularly I'm interested in this show, right? Or, I just skimmed through the discussion board. But for example, Kevin, you were talking about maybe writing about the Stan Lee as an icon. Stan Lee is one icon amongst many icons within the comic book world, right? But that's good that you want to focus in on like Stan Lee. Or May was talking about writing about a particular TV show. I can't remember it. Not talking about TV in general. That's obviously way too broad. But talking about a particular television show. So a focus is a more specific subject within a topic. So Riot Girl is obviously a focus within subculture topic. Femininity is a more specific focus within the larger topic of gender. Now, something that's important to keep in mind here, and this is when it comes to how do you start taking whatever topic you're interested in, even if it's the icon topic, fine, whatever, and making it more focused so it can be more argumentative for our papers. Well, you usually need to combine with some sort of social issue. So I'm going to take a couple examples of, let's say, more general topics, things that have come up either in our topic, Brainstorm, discussion board, or those of my other classes. So let's say I'm interested in theater, right? That's something I'm really interested in. Obviously, theater, like I just said, and therapy, or I'm interested in therapy, whatever. Let's say these are my two topics. Theater and therapy both are way too broad for a 5-page paper. People don't even just, rarely do people just write books, entire books on the theater. They'll write books about like Shakespearean theater or theater and race or theater in the 21st century or theater and technology, right? They won't be writing a whole book, even a whole book is not necessarily enough to, theater's a massive topic. So is therapy. So is subcultures, right? So I need to make these things more specific. So I'm going to start somewhere with like an interest, like, oh, I have an interest in video games. Okay, well then let's narrow that down. So I have an interest in theater. How do I narrow that down? You want to narrow it to a specific show and or connect it to a specific social issue, right? You should recognize this. This is stuff we've been doing all semester long. So maybe I want to talk about theater and how it teaches us ethics and morality. That gives me a little bit more focused, right? Theater is still quite broad, but at least I'm a little more narrowed down with defining a more specific issue. Even better is to get more specific. I'm going to write about the Broadway show Rent, and I'm going to talk about how that show critiques poverty and the class system in our society. By the way, forgive me, I've never seen Rent. I have no idea if it touches upon notions of poverty. I assumed it did because it's called Rent, but maybe it means something totally different. Usually any kind of narrative, even if it's only touched upon in small ways, you can make, social issues pop up in almost most narratives. But the point of my example is to show you the example on the right, Rent and a Critique of Poverty. That paper is easier for me to write because I have immediately something to think about. So obviously, if I was going to write a paper on Rent or do a video essay on Rent, I've seen it before. So I can immediately now think back, what are the parts of that show that relate to class? Like, oh, maybe I remember there's a particular scene where two characters get in an argument or, are in a fight because they can't afford to pay their rent. Or maybe there's a character that's really wealthy in the show and another character that's really poor. Or maybe there's a song in the show that's about, being homeless or not being able to find a job or whatever. Again, I don't know anything about the show Rent, so I could be way off base. But to make my point, if I sit there and say to myself, so what are the aspects or elements of the theater in general that teaches ethics? That's a little harder to answer. It's also way too broad. I immediately have to start thinking about particular shows like, well, maybe Hamlet teaches us something about family and teaches us something about jealousy or, whatever it might be. So the more specific I can be when I'm narrowing down my topic, usually the more effective it is. Because what happens is, I know it seems sort of ironic. It's like, well, if I stay broad, I'll have more to write about. I actually feel like if you stay broad, that's where you get writer's block. One of the more well-known tricks, if you wanted to write a novel, let's say, we're not writing novels, but if you want to write a novel, one of the well-known tricks to do that, not that it's easy to write a novel, is not to sit there and try and plan out the entire novel and what's the big topic you're going to do. If you're going to write something, you just start with something small. Start with your character waking up and getting out of bed. What does she feel like? What is she thinking? What's on the radio? And then it suddenly starts to grow from there, right? So I start with something specific, because if I sit there and sort of confront myself with this huge idea, it in my opinion, it leads to writer's block, and that's where writer's block comes from. So if I have something like Rent, the show, that's more specific, and I have a social issue like class and poverty and wealth, that allows me to have something to think about. There's something I can sink my teeth into, type thing. So same way with something like therapy, narrow to a specific type of therapy, interconnect to a specific issue. So, art-based therapy for children, right? That's a little bit more narrow. It's a little more focused, right? I'm talking about I have a specific thing I can analyze in terms of art-based therapy, whether it's, painting or drawing or coloring or music or whatever it might be. I'm also talking in particular how it's useful to children, or even more musical therapy in particular, and how it can help people with PTSD, or even veterans with PTSD, or people who have post-traumatic stress disorder. So you got to keep in mind the scope of these essays. I know that 4 to 5 pages is not nothing, obviously, but you're really only talking about 3 or 4 analysis paragraphs. So I'm not going to be able to write a really strong essay about the theater in general in 4 to 5 pages, because it's way too broad a topic. It's also going to be very difficult to get into specific details, evidence, and examples. If I'm writing about musical therapy, then yeah, or the show Rent, or art-based therapy, yeah, I'm probably going to be able to get a lot more specific. And then in terms of my argument and analysis, I'm going to be able to make more interesting points if I'm talking about a particular social issue, like what Rent has to say about class, or how musical therapy helps with PTSD. It's not that musical therapy only helps with people with PTSD. That's the thing I'm focusing on. It's not that Rent only touches upon the social issue of poverty and wealth. It's just that's what I'm going to take a look at. That's the lens I'm using. So, okay. A couple of people mentioned possibly interested in writing about coronavirus, and I'm happy for you to do that. I mean, I think it can make for an successful argument. Excuse me. But a couple things I would keep in mind. One is we're still in the middle of this pandemic, which is to say that should be looked at in terms of a couple things. Obviously, there's a lot of writing and a lot of talking and a lot of stuff going on about coronavirus and I mean, it's everywhere, right? I mean, you type in coronavirus and Google it, you're going to get millions upon millions of results. So there's almost too much information. So that's one issue, on the sense that, like, there's so much going on, because we still don't really understand what are the ramifications of this. We're living through it as we speak. What is coronavirus going to do to the economy? Well, we know one thing for sure: it's going to shut it down. Okay, but how is the economy going to be different going forward? Sure, there's some speculation, but so in other words, we don't really know what the consequences of this are. It doesn't mean you can't write a paper that sort of speculates how you think this will change our lives. Okay, that's one thing. So you're welcome to do that, but I just want to sort of say that we need to focus that, which I'll talk about in a second. The other thing is that coronavirus is pretty much all we think about right now. So realize that you're diving into a project where you're just going to be doing more and more thinking about something that's already hard to think about. I don't mean hard to think about in terms of difficult. I mean, it's just that coronavirus has obviously taken over our lives. So, do you want to sort of dive into that? That's an emotional space that maybe you don't want to dive into. So be careful and be wary of that, and be fair to yourself, right? We've got another paper to write. These papers aren't easy to write in normal circumstances, right? So be fair to yourself. Like, maybe you really do want to do the video essay and you want to do it on coronavirus, but that might be too much right now. Maybe save that for another project on another day where you feel like we'll be in a better place where you can do that more successfully. You've got to sort of consider your own context, your own situation, right? And try and set yourself up as best you can for success in terms of making these choices, right? Okay, so let's say I was going to do coronavirus, and this relates to, again, about narrowing down the focus. Still need to write a critical analysis and argument. We are all doing that. So writing about the coronavirus in general, way too broad of a topic. The coronavirus has affected every single aspect, pretty much, of our lives, in our world, in our society. So if I go and take a look at some of the more analytical and argumentative pieces out there about coronavirus, there's obviously a ton of stuff about that's informational, right? What the coronavirus does, blah, blah. But we're not writing a book report. You're not writing a research paper about what the coronavirus is. You need to make an argument about how the coronavirus is changing some aspect of our society or affecting some sort of social issue. So if I go and look at some articles that are out there, right, we have things like the coronavirus exposes education's digital divide. How is the coronavirus affecting education? I'm sorry, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think Gabby might have been writing about that. Somebody was writing about that in their post. But you want to make sure you have a focused issue in relation to what the coronavirus is doing. I have more of these. So coronavirus, what the racial data shows, right? The other title of this was how the coronavirus is exposing our racial divide as opposed to digital divide. In other words, what the coronavirus has exposed is the way that the kind of infrastructural racism in our society, meaning the marginalization, the discrimination, the institutional racism that primarily Black and brown people experience in our society, is also making the coronavirus that much worse for those populations, because they don't have the space, they don't have the health care, they don't have the resources. It's not like their immune system, anybody's immune system is different from anybody's else's, but it's a matter of exposing how being marginalized, being discriminated against, being not having all the same opportunities and resources is a big problem in our society. So the coronavirus connected to issues of race and racial divide, coronavirus connected to the political divide, coronavirus connected to teaching us what can it teach us about how we need to change mental health care, right? And virtual mental health care, coronavirus and how it's changing the entertainment business and the arts, right? I think Netflix just came out with, I haven't seen it, but I heard somebody talking about, like, they now have like Netflix Party or something. Have you guys heard about this? Where like you can watch shows with like a chat feature with your friends concurrently. But also I heard it wasn't a conversation, it was actually a video essay about this sci-fi author talking about how this virus is going to change how sci-fi gets written and how sci-fi gets made. Meaning, like, you know, our apocalyptic stories, like The Walking Dead, would The Walking Dead be a different show post coronavirus? So point being is that I need to think about a particular social issue, of course, how coronavirus is changing healthcare. That could be another direction I could go. Again, these are newspaper articles or blog articles. These things are probably, in some cases 8 to 10 pages long, right? And we're writing a 4 to 5 page. Again, not that 4 to 5 pages is not nothing, but you only need like 3 or 4 elements of analysis. So the more focused I can be, the better. Okay, one last slide and then we'll open it up for questions. Full disclosure, I just came up with a list of questions that you could ask yourself in terms of testing whether or not your topic idea, your focus, can be effective as an argument or analysis. It's one of those questions I get all the time, naturally, which is like a student will come to me and say, like, hey, Rick, I'm thinking about writing about, coronavirus in education and how it's changing education, or it's going to change our educational system. Okay, will that make for a good paper, right? Or will that make for a good argument or analysis? And so essentially what they're asking me is that going to make something that's going to make for a strong argument? So how do you figure that out for yourself, without always having just to sort of rely on me? Inevitably, my response is going to be something like, well, when you do a close analysis of the way our education has changed due to coronavirus, Do you feel like that's going to teach the reader something that's important or valuable or meaningful, right? So here's, I'm going to put up a lot of questions here. I don't want you to be overwhelmed by that. Like I said, I just came up with like, I don't know, like 7 questions that if they're useful to you, then use them. If not, don't worry about it. But I think they can be useful in terms of deciding what will make a good focus for my next essay or video essay. I'm going to put back up here the sort of 3 qualities that critical analysis is about, right? Context, meaning it's focused, certain, who, what, where, when, why, analyzing something within context, usually our society at this time. In-depth and challenges assumptions, meaning the analysis is going to be detailed. There's going to be specific evidence and examples. It's also not just reporting on what people already know about something, right? It also has some sort of social significance, some sort of, it teaches us something about our society or about ourselves. So testing for the viability of that, there's going to be a bunch of questions that pop up. It's going to be a big block of text. Don't freak out. I'm not going to go through each one of these in super depth detail. I'm going to move through most of them fairly quickly. But I sort of want to ask myself, this is what I ask myself when I'm thinking about writing about something. Will my argument or analysis do one of these things? And actually, before I say that, you want to make sure, first thing, so let's say I'm going to write about the Broadway show Rent and how it teaches us something about class, poverty and wealth. The first question you should answer yes to, no matter what your focus is. Will my argument analysis provide an in-depth analysis of at least 3 elements of my focus? In other words, if I'm thinking about writing about rent and how it teaches us something about class in our society, if I can't think of 3 elements, even after doing a little bit of research, if I still can't think of 3 elements of that show that I could analyze in relation to my issue, then I would switch focus. Usually you should be able to pick out 3 things that you think you can analyze from your focus about the social issue. But it happens in cases that, let me give you an example of a case where it didn't work out. I had a student I had an assignment, not unlike our non-traditional narrative assignment, but the assignment was about writing about kids' narratives, like fairy tales, or children's books, or children's cartoons, or children's films. And so I had a student came to me and she wanted to write about this kid's song called, I don't even know what the song's called. I had no idea what the song was at that point, because this is before I had a child. I do know the song, unfortunately, very well now because I have a son. But it's this song, and forgive me, it's super bizarre and goofy. It goes like, mommy finger, where are you? I don't know why it's fingers. It's super weird, right? Mommy finger, where are you? Daddy finger, where are you? Here I am, how do you do? That's the song, okay? So she was really fascinated by this song for whatever reason, the student, and she was like, I want to write my analysis of it. So I was like, all right, well, you want to try and are you going to be able to find 3 elements of that thing that you can analyze? Sorry, I think somebody was trying to come in, maybe not. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just looking at the chat. Netflix party, people have heard of it. Okay, wait. Sorry, somebody was coming to me. Okay, anyway, so I was like, can you think of 3 elements that you could analyze in relation to that song? And obviously, it was just, there wasn't enough there, right? It's like, well, like, what argument are you going to make? I mean, maybe it's some sort of argument about what it teaches kids about family, I guess, and family relationships. But right, but she couldn't even think of 3 elements in relation to the thing. So it was like, all right, move on. Let's go to a different focus. So that first one of these questions, that one you should for sure be able to answer yes to. Yes, you might need to do some research first. Like, okay, let me go do a little bit of research. Okay, maybe I remember like a couple things about Rent that definitely connect to class. But then I would want to go watch like a film version of the play, or I'm not going to have a chance to probably go watch the play again. But and then I also want to do some research. It's like, okay, then maybe I can come up with a few more. but you want at least 3. So that one, out of all these questions, you should be answering yes to. These other questions, and I'm not going to spend nowhere near as much time. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, and many of these things overlap. Uh-oh. Alize, I'm going to mute you just because we can all hear you. So will my argument analysis provide a different or new understanding of your focus? In other words, or will it provide a different or new understanding of your social issue? In other words, how does your focus maybe get us to think about gender differently, or teach us something about gender that we don't, commonly know, right? Or how does, when you look at the new online education system, how does it teach us something different about education, right? Or, education under coronavirus. How do we learn something different about education? How does your argument analysis, does it provide further understanding of your focus or social issue beyond what's already there, right? So, maybe, in analyzing The Little Mermaid, I realized that it teaches us something about femininity that maybe is lesser known, right? That femininity, many of its principles or many of its characteristics, are perhaps geared towards men, right? Ironically. So does it provide a challenge to common assumptions about your focus and or social issue? So for example, some people for our last paper in subcultures are writing about the doomsday prepper subculture. Or the survivalist subculture, right? And the common mainstream stereotype of doomsday preppers, particularly prior to coronavirus, was that they're a little crazy, they're a little paranoid, they're a little, there's a TV show that kind of doomsday I think it's called Doomsday Preppers, and the TV show would show them doing, stockpiling food, stockpiling weapons, talking about zombie apocalypses, right? And most people in mainstream society would be like, okay, these people are a little out there. But, right, and that could, in some ways, they could be a little paranoid, and that could be true. But how is it that when we look closer at the subculture, we actually might learn some things that are valuable about sort of independence, making sure your preparedness, blah, blah, blah. So beyond those common assumptions of doomsday preppers, we can learn something from that subculture. Or, the common assumptions of video games, right? This is a really one you've heard before. Common assumption about video games, or the common stereotype of video games, is that they're bad for your health, physical health. They make you violent. They make you angry. They isolate you. They make you solipsistic and isolatory and all that stuff. And most of us know that those things, while there might be instances where there's cases of that happening or blah, 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 most of us know that there's all kinds of other things that video games can do that are not that, right? Does it provide an uncommon connection between your focus and a social issue, right? In other words, while most people have talked about the Black Panthers in terms of race and race relations and racial empowerment, maybe I want to take a look at the Black Panthers in terms of what they teach us about education, so that's another thing I can do. So the idea is that you can notice with all these questions, the idea is that your reader is learning something, right? And I don't just mean learning something in terms of information. They're learning something about how our society works, or learning something about themselves, or why a certain social problem exists. So they're getting that sort of social value aspect that you see on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So this is a list of questions. Like I said, with that first one, I'm going to say you want to make sure you check at least 2 of these in relation to whatever focus you're dealing with. And then I think you'll have a little bit of a sense of how to move forward. The reason I say 2 is because you should check off that first one, no doubt, before you start writing a paper or developing a video essay. Are there 3 elements I can think of that I can analyze in relation to my focus? If there's not, then maybe focus or narrow your focus that much more. So go from theater in general to the show Rent. Okay, now I can see that there's elements I can focus in on. And then maybe one other, which is more argument related. What is your paper teaching us that's about our society, about ourselves, about a social issue that has some sort of insight or value? Okay. I'm gonna bounce out of this. Obviously, oh, well, this reminds me of something. In terms of the remainder of the assignments this week, we need to reply to our two of our peers' posts in the topic brainstorm discussion board by the end of tomorrow night. That's the end of Thursday night. The other thing is by the end of Friday night, we have a post called the snapshot plan. What it is essentially you writing a post that represents your plan for this last paper, right? So by Friday night, I want you to have a sense of what your focus is for your argumentative analysis, as well as what medium you're going to use. Meaning, are you going to write a traditional central claim, subclaim driven essay that we've been doing in 105 and 106 this whole semester? Or are you planning on doing a video essay? The reason I want to know these things by Friday, or we want to have these things in our head, not just me knowing it, but I want you to know it as well, is because we have about the same amount of time we did for the first essay. Obviously, for the second essay, we had more time because we had spring break, and then 2 spring breaks, and then I gave you some extra time due to us sort of transitioning into this whole new reality, at least for the moment. So it's not that we're like super short on time to write this essay, but we do want to sort of get to a sense of what our focus is and what medium we're going to be working in by the end of this week. And that's what that Friday post will do. It also will let me know if you're doing a video essay, your assignments are going to be a little bit different in content. You're still going to be doing a workshop draft. You're still going to be doing a revised draft, except obviously it's going to be a video essay instead of a written essay. Your workshop draft is going to be a video workshop draft. The video workshop draft won't be a video. It'll be like you giving us a sense of your outline or your plan for the video, as well as a couple example slides. It's probably what it'll look like. It'll be a rough draft of like a rough plan for a video essay. So, but I need to know who's doing what so I can sort of cook you up with the right assignments. It's not that doing one medium or the other gives you more work or less work in terms of the actual assignments. It's the exact same, but it'll obviously they'll be geared different a little bit content-wise, because those who are working on video essays, I'll be talking to them and designing assignments where you're thinking about how to create a good video essay. Okay, let me jump out of sharing my screen here, and I want to open it up for questions. Any kind of questions if you want me to go back over stuff. Thanks. So let me just stop sharing my screen. Hopefully this will work okay. Okay. All right, so I guess if you guys, and again, the questions can be about this module, this assignment, or they can be, or the video essay or whatever, the written essay. It can be about anything, or they can be about our class going forward. And then I'll just sort of leave it open for those questions. And then after that, you guys are free to go. If there's no questions, everybody's free to go. But I'll stick around here if anybody wants to stick around and talk about something specifically or in relation to, and people can hang around just to hear that conversation as well if they want. So let's just start. Let's take, I don't know, does anybody have any questions they want to ask right now before we sort of end this session?
I have a question, Rick.
Yeah.
So if we do the cultural icon, we should focus on like one aspect of that person's life that like impacted society.
Actually, really good question, Tom. I'm glad you brought that up. So I think you were, sorry, give me 1 second. I think did you bring up?
I brought up Michael
Jackson, right. And somebody else, right? LeBron James or?
Yeah, LeBron.
So yeah, if you're doing the icon essay, sorry, let me just bring something up here. If you're doing the icon essay, oh, shoot. Anyways, I had it written down. I had taken quick notes on people's different topic ideas, and I can't. Oh, here it is. Found it. Okay, if you're doing the icon essay, so this is probably good for all of those who are deciding to write about a cultural icon. The icon essay you'll be focusing on at least 3 elements of how that icon has impacted our society. And you also want to think about it in terms of, again, just like we talked about, in terms of a particular social issue. So let me take like somebody like LeBron James. Well, let me answer this question in two parts. What would be the elements of an icon? Well, it would be what they do or what they've created or how they interact with society. So that could be anything from, like, let me take the example of LeBron James. Obviously, LeBron James is an athlete, he plays basketball, but LeBron James does a lot more than that. So for example, let's say I want to write about how LeBron James is helping to allow for equal opportunity for people of color in society, right? Or helping young African American kids get education. Okay. One thing, obviously, is that LeBron is a great role model as an athlete, right? So that's just one thing that's clear. People look up to LeBron. LeBron represents hope that they too can sort of strive for greatness and be great. Okay, so that's one thing. Other things that LeBron does, and I haven't done any research into LeBron, but this is just what I know off the top of my head. He's opened his own school for young kids, right? You probably heard about this, right? It's a school
Right.
where I think pays their entire tuition. They get like awesome resources. I'm sure they pay their teachers well there, so they're getting good education from the teachers. They get like, iPads, they get all the books, they get all the stuff, right? They probably have, connections and networking with universities or high school, however it works. So he has his school. Um, he probably has other charitable foundations that I don't even know about. I'm sure he does some sort of charitable foundations. LeBron also does things like, I know he like produces a TV show.
Yeah.
I think that show Life is something that he produced.
So he does like a show on HBO where he like talks to like a bunch of different like influential celebrities in like
Oh,
a
great.
barber shop or whatever. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. So, so I want to, yeah, those would be the elements, is what does your icon do? And oftentimes that's going to be even beyond what they do for their career, right? I mean, LeBron's a basketball player, and that's certainly one of the things he does for our society, is he represents this kind of, you know, uh, I mean, I'm sure he inspires people all over to sort of become better athletically. But then LeBron also does so many other things, and it could be even small things. Like it could be like, I'm not sure saying this would apply to LeBron, but it could be something like their website, right? Like, let's say I was writing about Kim Kardashian as an icon. A big element with Kim Kardashian is her social media presence, right? So that might be something I analyze, like her Instagram account and maybe her Twitter account too. But her fashion line, her perfume line. I don't really know much about Kim Kardashian, forgive me. But so those would be the elements. It wouldn't just be one thing they do. It would be the at least three things they do that you see impact a particular aspect or social issue in society, if that makes sense.
Right. No, I get it.
And it's also like, you don't have to make an argument also, if you're writing about icon, like how great they are. If you feel like your icon is actually having an adverse effect or problematic effect, you could do that, right? So like, for example, I have another student, I'm not trying to promote any kind of attitude here. I'm not soapboxing here, but she wants to write a critique of Donald Trump. Okay. So, so she was like, so I just want to sort of like critique and she had a bunch of negative things to say about Donald Trump. And so a couple of things I said to her was, first of all, you're not writing about whether or not you think that icon is cool or great or awesome. You need to make an argument about how and why that icon you think is having a positive or a damaging social impact. So she was like, well, I want to write about how Donald Trump is like, again, this is not me announcing these opinions. She wants to write about how Donald Trump. So I was like, you need to choose a social issue. So she was like, oh, okay, I'm interested in writing about how Donald Trump is increasing the sort of racial division in our society, right? And increasing the kind of hate crimes and racial hatred and racial stereotypes. I said, perfect, right? But you've got to show how he's doing that. So it could be like with the styles, the things he says in his speeches. Another thing could be the things he actually does, that he writes in his tweets. It also could be the way in which he answers questions, or the way he, so it needs to be concrete things that you can analyze. And it doesn't have to be positive. So Kevin, I don't think Kevin's here. Oh, Kevin is here. So Kevin, like you were interested in perhaps writing about Stan Lee, and your argument could be focused on how Stan Lee really shaped the comic book industry in his own unique way. I mean, you're already starting to write about that, right? What was, so Stan Lee's impact, social impact, has more to do with like shaping and creating the whole comic book world and that kind of comic book vibe. So that's that kind of impact there. Somebody else like Renee's in here. Renee, you were thinking maybe Chief Keef. I felt like Chief Keef might be a little more interesting than Cristiano Ronaldo. Youssef, you were talking about Ronaldo as well. Let me say something about Ronaldo in just a second. With Chief Keef, I think it's interesting is because he had an impact, obviously, on a certain style of hip. I mean, I think he was like one of the main drill rap guys, wasn't he? I could be wrong about that. Forgive me if I am. But in other words, there you can make your argument about how Chief Keef played a huge role in sort of creating a whole new kind of style and genre aesthetic of hip hop and image and all that stuff, right? Ronaldo, my question there would be, with Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player, my question would there, I don't want to write a paper where I'm just saying how great he is. One of the greatest soccer players. I mean, it's inarguable. One of the greatest soccer players of all time. One of the most iconic athletes of all time. I don't want to get into the Lionel Messi debate. I'm not trying to go there. But, so you don't want to just write a paper. We're not writing a book report on Cristiano Ronaldo and how great he is and the great goals he scored and, or how a lot of people feel like Ronaldo's a jerk and you're making critical analysis. So why does Ronaldo matter? Like, does Ronaldo, I don't know what he does. Like, does he do something? Do you feel like he actually taints the image of soccer? Does he actually create, as much as he's a wonderful athlete, does he actually sort of bring down the kind of, I don't know, then I have to ask myself, what does soccer give us that's important? Right? So soccer gives us what? It gives us a sense of, I mean, yes, it entertains us, but fine. I mean, one of the things I could think of is that maybe you want to go into that realm is that, and I think Youssef, you've heard me say this before. We turn to sports for things like, a sense of ethics. Like we judge sports players all the time, right? We sit there and say like, well, LeBron, we're just talking about LeBron James. LeBron represents this really important figure in our society. By the way, were there any other quick questions before I go off on a tangent? I want to let everybody go because we're pretty much done. Obviously, you can stick around and hear me talk about these different topic ideas. But if you're good and you're all set, if there's any quick questions before I continue on about Ronaldo, speak up now.
I actually kind of have a little question.
Yeah.
It's kind of dumb, but for the video essay,
yeah,
is it recorded? Like we have to do a presentation as well, and how do we, if we do a video essay, how do we present you that presentation as well as speak?
Okay, so you are not presenting it live. You are recording it. So that's why it's a video essay. So PowerPoint, Google Slides, almost any slide presentation. There's also other software. So a couple questions here that I think it'll be useful for anybody who's thinking of doing a video essay. PowerPoint, Google Slides, they all have capabilities, and I give you instructions about how to do it, how you can record a narration over the slides. So yeah, you'll be recording a video. It needs to be a minimum of 8 minutes, maximum of 10 minutes. Have 6 to 8 slides. Okay. Now, if you're one of these people who has technical knowledge about like, you don't want to use PowerPoint, but you know how to make like videos using iMovie or whatever, or I'm not good with video software, so forgive me. Then you can go that route too. But it is recorded, Youssef, so you're not presenting it. So the other thing is you need to be capable of sharing it. I mean, and this could be like you're either going to post it to YouTube or, almost every sort of piece of software has a different share feature. So yeah, we'll be posting it to we'll actually be, for our workshop drafts, we'll be posting it. Actually, excuse me, if you were submitting that as your video essay for your revised draft, you'd either be linking me to it to an online video hosting like YouTube. You can obviously set it to just being private, so nobody else can see it and just I can see it or whatever. But yeah, you're going to need to share it. But it's recorded. You won't ever present it live.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, man, no problem. Any other? That was a good question. I think there was something else that I was going to say about that question. I can't remember it now. But that was it. It's recorded, and you need to be able to share it. Obviously, I'm going to need to be able to see it. All right, if there's no other specific question, guys, just a couple of quick things. Reply to 2 of your peers' posts from the topic brainstorm discussion board by the end of tomorrow night. If you want extra CP3 points, you can do extra replies. You obviously get 2 CP3 points for being here right now. The other thing is you need to make a post to the snapshot plan discussion board by the end of Friday night. In that post, you'll note you have to do a little bit of research for that post, by the way. So make sure you look at it sooner rather than later. Like, in other words, just Google, like if I was writing about, like if I'm Dom and I'm going to write about LeBron James, I'm going to want to do some quick research about how LeBron James is changing or affecting race relations in society, or how he's empowering young students or whatever. I don't know, whatever it might be. Do some quick research, see what's already out there, what's been said. So you'll see that's part of that post. But that post is due Friday. You also need to let us know, are you planning on writing a traditional essay? You're letting us know what focus you're writing about and what medium you're using, traditional written essay or video essay. And that's it. If you want to have a one-on-one sort of office hour conversation with me, I'm happy to do it. I'm not going to host regular office hours because in doing that previously, it just usually ends up with me sitting there for 2 hours and nobody comes in. And I've had a way better experience when people reach out to me like, hey, Rick, can we talk for like 10 minutes tomorrow on Zoom? Yes, absolutely. Let me set that up. So if you want to reach out to me and have a quick meeting, we probably won't have another Zoom workshop this week. We won't have one this week. I know that. But we might have one next week. We'll definitely have another one before we write our workshop drafts. Last thing, sorry. Next week, we have the invention posts. Those invention posts are from, on Tuesday, will be from Sieta, Gabby, Nina, and Grace. And then we will all, that's on Tuesday, the end of Tuesday night next week. The end of Wednesday night, we'll all reply to their posts. By the end of Thursday night, Salome, Sunny, and Kiara, which I think are, all these people are not in here, so it doesn't really matter, but they're going to do their posts by the end of Thursday night. Oh, Grace is in here. And then we'll be replying to those posts next Friday night. So next week is all the invention posts. And then the week after that, which is week 15, on the April 29th, which is Wednesday, our workshop draft is due. So that's why we want to make sure we have our focus set. Our workshop draft is due 2 weeks from now, but you know, have that in mind. Good to see you guys. Take care. I'm not leaving, by the way, but if you're good to go, you don't need to listen in on the rest of the conversations. You're welcome to leave now. Thanks for being here. Thanks for tuning in. Take care of one another, and take care of yourself. Try and stay sane. Be patient with yourself. Be humble. Thanks, guys. See ya, Gloriana. Take care. So to finish my point with Ronaldo, is I would want to think about what kind of social impact that figure is having in relation to a particular social issue. Now, I was talking about sports and ethics. I was saying that, like, sports, you know, plays a big role in our culture and society, right? Not just entertainment, but we often turn to sports for a notion of ethics, for people to look up to, for ideals. You know, so, you know, Ronaldo might be one of the most brilliant and talented and athletic soccer players of all time, but does he use his iconic power in a way that you feel is productive? So, you know, I mean, LeBron, I feel like might be a better focus because he sort of really connects to that. Michael Jackson might be a good idea. I mean, I think it's for sure Cristiano Ronaldo could be that. I just, I don't perhaps know enough about him, but I don't want to just write a paper where I'm saying, like, explaining who he is, talking about his life story. The only time that I would do that is if I'm making an argument about how that's meaningful towards something. Let me see. Like, for example, like Kevin, who's not here anymore, but, Konstantinos. Let me give you Konstantinos here. So Konstantinos is maybe thinking about writing about either Henry Ford or Ralph Baer. I don't know if I'm saying that name right. And I guess Ralph Baer was kind of a video game pioneer icon. My initial thought would be that Henry Ford would be the more interesting argument, or it would be more argumentative, be a better critical analysis. Again, my only initial thought, but like, because he really changed, he impacted our society dramatically in terms of capitalism and in terms of work, right? He invented the sort of assembly line. He invented sort of factory work, you know, for better or for worse. You know, he was really a sort of pioneer of the industrial age. However, you know, I don't know much about Ralph Baer, but Ralph Baer, I mean, you could argue, I mean, he obviously pioneered the video games. And so why is that important? Why is that impactful? That's something that I think you could certainly develop. And if I would say, I would write, either of those could work. You just want to make sure that you have a kind of a sense of like, what argument do you want to make? What did Ralph Baer, so he gave us video games, but why is that important? Why is that valuable? How did he shape video games or the video game world in a way that made it really meaningful or impactful in our society? Let's see. Any other questions? I can talk about everybody's who's here, but are there any other questions from those of you? Gabby, I can talk about your thinking, and Kiara, I can talk about yours as well. So Kiara, you, the one that stuck out to me out of your two initial ideas, well, I already said the thing about coronavirus. You'd want to think about that in terms of some sort of social issue. The one that stuck out to me was what I felt was kind of art and education. Bye, Kevin. Was art and education, and how, like, I mean, in some ways it'd be related to the paper you wrote at the end of last semester, but like, you know, how is it that even in education and fashion, right? So we often talk about the fashion world in terms of the professional and the corporate world, but there's a whole aspect of the fashion world that is fashion education. Like, so not only like beauty schools and fashion schools like FIDM, Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, or you know, there's a whole, and you're sort of pointing out from your own personal experience, fashion was something that was really important to you and is important to you in terms of your own education. So talking about how fashion and fashion education is valuable and important, you know, it gives something, you know, most people think like, oh, I'm interested in fashion, but that's just some hobby I have. Well, no, it's actually a whole career. My wife, you know, it's what she does, right? She studied, what did you study, babe? Sorry, I call my wife babe. Design and merchandising, what did you? Apparel marketing. Okay, so she, you know, went to college for apparel marketing. She knows how to sell clothes. So it's like, I think that would be an interesting argument. And even at a young age, right? Like your age and younger, right? That field, like, you know, it's creative, it's analytical, right? So talking about how that kind of, the fashion world is also like an educative world for young people, might be a way to go. Or if you're going to go coronavirus, or obviously you could go something totally different if you wanted to. If you're going to go coronavirus, I would maybe connect it to, I mean, since you have an interest in fashion, I was thinking, how does coronavirus change fashion? I mean, you have all these people creating masks now. You have different companies creating hospital gowns. Will fashion change? I mean, but that might be a situation where it's like it's too soon to sort of tell. Gabby, I think you wrote about chakras, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I know very little about chakras, but I know they're kind of like are they yoga thing? Not a yoga thing, but
So it's, yeah, like most of it is just meditation. It's just energy sources in the body.
okay. So I could see you writing a paper about that, but your argument, just off the top of my head again, you want to think about what argument you want to make. Are you trying to say that like knowledge of these, in understanding and knowledge and a practice, if you will, of these chakras is something that can actually allow us to be both more spiritually in tune, as well as, and emotionally in tune, as well as physically in tune? That might be something like, it's a good, maybe an understanding of chakras and doing that is a good way to sort of have a more kind of like balanced health, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking of giving the education that it's beneficial, but I didn't do much research into how it can be beneficial.
Okay, yeah, because that's the thing is like, you sort of want to, I'm going to stop the recording now. So bye people who are tuning in later.